Ethan wiped down the counter, her worn-out sneakers a world away from the millions being discussed in booth 4. She was just a waitress, invisible to the two powerful men deciding the fate of an empire over coffee. But she heard everything. A warning formed on her lips. A warning that could either save a man's fortune or cost her the only job she had. She took the risk, and the next day, a $500,000 Rolls-Royce Phantom, black as midnight, didn't just drive past her tiny apartment. It stopped right at her door. The clatter of porcelain and the low hum of expensive conversations were the soundtrack to Ethan Vance's life. She worked the 4 p.m. to midnight shift at the Gilded Quill, a restaurant that clung to old-world charm and astronomical prices. It was a place where discreet was the house policy, and the staff were trained to be ghosts in smart black uniforms. Ethan was better at it than most. She was pale, with quiet grey eyes, and an ability to melt into the shadows of the mahogany-panelled dining room. She needed this job. She really needed it. Her younger brother, Liam, had one more semester of college, and her paycheck, supplemented by meager tips from businessmen too self-important to make eye contact, was the only thing keeping him there. Rent was late, as usual, and her landlord, Mr. Henderson, was not a patient man. Tonight, her primary responsibility was booth 4, the most coveted and secluded table in the restaurant. It was occupied by its usual Tuesday tenants, Arthur Vanderwall and Julian Thorne. Arthur Vanderwall was an enigma. He was one of the wealthiest men in New York, yet he dressed in unassuming, though clearly bespoke, tweed jackets, and spoke with a gentle, almost academic tone. He always looked Ethan in the eye, always said, "Please," and always tipped a flat 30%, whether she served him a glass of water or a 3-course meal. He seemed kind. Lonely, even. His companion, Julian Thorne, was the opposite. Julian was sharp, both in his tailored Italian suits and his cutting gaze. He was handsome in a severe, arrogant way, all sharp angles and a smile that never reached his cold, dark eyes. He treated Ethan like a piece of furniture, snapping his fingers for service, and never once acknowledging her existence as a person. They had been friends since childhood, the restaurant gossip claimed. Julian's family had lost their fortune, and the Vanderwalls had taken him in. Now, Julian was the COO of Vanderwall Industries, Arthur's second-in-command, his most trusted advisor. Tonight, the tension at booth 4 was thicker than the béarnaise sauce. Arthur looked tired, his face pale under the dim lighting. Julian, however, was practically vibrating with energy. There were stacks of documents on the table between them, bound in expensive-looking leather. "Arthur, it's the deal of a lifetime," Julian was saying, his voice a low, persuasive purr. "The Heritage Fund is the final piece. It diversifies everything. It protects your legacy." "It's just so much, Julian. My entire portfolio?" Arthur murmured, rubbing his temples. "And to move it all offshore, it feels smart," Julian interjected, his smile tightening. "It's what your father would have done. It's what I am advising you to do. We need to be agile, Arthur. The markets are volatile." Ethan approached silently, a fresh pot of coffee in hand. "More coffee, Mr. Vanderwall?" Arthur startled, then gave her a weak smile. "Oh, yes. Thank you, Ethan." Julian sighed, an impatient, theatrical sound. "Must you interrupt? We are in the middle of something." "My apologies, sir," Ethan said softly, filling Arthur's cup. Her hand was steady, but her heart ached for the man who looked so overwhelmed. She glanced at the cover sheet of the document. "Project Aegis, final asset transfer." It sounded ominous. She retreated to the server station, polished wine glasses, and watched. The dynamic was all wrong. It wasn't a partnership, it was a predator and his prey. The night dragged on. The main dining room began to empty. Arthur and Julian remained, the stack of documents still sitting unsigned. Julian was growing visibly frustrated. His mask of friendly concern was slipping. "I don't understand your hesitation, Arthur," Julian snapped, his voice a little louder now. "After 20 years of building this, you're going to get cold feet over a signature." "It's not cold feet, Julian. It's—" Arthur trailed off. "It's just a feeling. I can't explain it." "A feeling?" Julian scoffed. "We're not mystics, Arthur. We are businessmen. This is the culmination of my work. This fund secures us. It secures you." Julian's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and for a split second, a look of pure, unadulterated rage crossed his features before he smoothed it away. "Excuse me. I have to take this. It's the London office." He stood up, snatched the phone, and stalked away, not towards the exit, but towards the alcove by the kitchens. A dead zone for conversation, he thought, but a perfect echo chamber if you stood in just the right spot. Ethan was in the adjoining service hallway, loading a heavy tray with dirty dishes from the last table. She froze. The kitchen doors were swinging, but in the momentary quiet, she heard Julian's voice, transformed. The charming purr was gone, replaced by a cold, hard blade. "No, it's not signed yet," he hissed into the phone. "The old fool is getting sentimental. I don't know, he's got some feeling." A pause. Ethan held her breath, the weight of the tray making her arms tremble. "Yes, the accounts are all in place," Julian continued. "The Aegis Fund is just a clearinghouse. The moment he signs, the primary transfer to the Cayman holding is triggered. From there, it's gone. Untraceable." Ethan's blood ran cold. She was just a waitress, but she wasn't stupid. She'd taken a community college class on business law before Liam's tuition fees forced her to drop out. Cayman holding, clearinghouse, untraceable. These were not the words of a friend. They were the words of a thief. "Look," Julian spat. "I don't care about his feeling. I've put too much into this. I've been managing his health, his investments, his entire pathetic life for a decade. He will sign tonight, even if I have to guide his hand. Just make sure the final transfer protocol is ready. Once I have his signature, I want Vanderwall Industries hollowed out by the time the markets open in Tokyo. He'll be left with nothing but this restaurant bill." He clicked off the phone and took a deep, steadying breath. Ethan heard him straighten his suit jacket. He was about to go back to the table. She was paralyzed. This was not her business. This was a fight between giants, and she was an ant. Getting involved would mean, at best, being fired. At worst, men like Julian Thorne didn't just fire people, they destroyed them. She thought of Liam. She thought of her late rent. Julian walked past the service hallway, not even registering her presence in the shadows. Ethan looked at Arthur Vanderwall, sitting alone at the table, looking lost and vulnerable. He had been kind to her. He always used her name. Damn it. She couldn't live with herself. She had to do something. Ethan's mind raced. She couldn't yell. She couldn't make a scene. Julian would be back in seconds. She needed something discreet, something deniable. She grabbed a clean, heavy linen napkin from the service stand and a pen from her apron pocket. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely write. She scribbled a few words, folded the napkin twice, and palmed it. Julian was already sliding back into the booth, his charming mask firmly in place. "Apologies, Arthur. London is in a panic, as usual. Now, about that signature." He slid the pen and the final signature page towards Arthur. "Now," Ethan said, stepping forward, her voice miraculously steady. She was holding the heavy coffee pot. "Mr. Vanderwall, before you finish, could I offer you a final warm-up?" Julian's head snapped up. I told you to leave us alone." "Ethan, that's very kind, but I'm quite all right," Arthur said, already reaching for the pen, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Please, sir," Ethan insisted, moving to his side. It was now or never. She leaned in close, as if to paw, and tripped. It was a masterful performance. She stumbled, not onto the documents, but onto Julian himself. The hot coffee, thankfully not scalding, but certainly shocking, splashed across the sleeve of Julian's expensive Xenia suit jacket. "Gah, you clumsy idiot," Julian roared, jumping up and batting at his arm. "This is silk. Do you know what this costs?" "I'm so sorry, sir. I tripped on the rug," Ethan stammered, her heart hammering. In that single chaotic second, as Julian was distracted, she placed her other hand on the table to steady herself. She pressed the folded napkin firmly into Arthur Vanderwall's left hand, which was resting, forgotten, by his lap. Her eyes met his for a fraction of a second. She gave a minuscule shake of her head. Arthur froze. His fingers closed around the napkin. "Get out! You're fired!" Julian bellowed, his face puce. "Julian, please, it was an accident," Arthur said, his voice suddenly clearer. He hadn't looked at the napkin yet, but the frantic, desperate look in Ethan's eyes had been enough. He'd felt the small, folded square pressed into his palm like a secret. I'll get my manager," Ethan said, backing away, tears of genuine fear now welling. She fled to the kitchen. 10 minutes later, her manager, a stern man named Mr. Dubois, called her to his office. "Ethan, Mr. Thorne is a valued guest. I'm afraid I have to let you go. Spilling coffee is one thing, but incompetence on this level, we can't have it." She didn't fight it. She just nodded, collected her bag, and walked out the back door into the cold night air, not even stopping to change out of her uniform. She was jobless. She was terrified. She walked the 40 blocks home. Back at the table, Arthur Vanderwall watched her go. After Julian had finished fuming and gone to the men's room to clean his jacket, Arthur opened his hand. He unfolded the napkin. The handwriting was shaky. "He's lying. Don't sign. He's moving everything to a K-Man holding. He said he'd hollow you out by morning. Check Project Aegis." Arthur read it 3 times. The blood drained from his face, leaving him colder than the winter air outside. He put the napkin in his pocket. When Julian returned, Arthur was putting on his coat. "Arthur, what are you doing?" "You're right, Julian. A deal this big, it requires a clear head. And I'm just too tired tonight," Arthur said, his voice flat. "We'll table it. My legal team will review it in the morning." "Your legal team? Arthur, we don't need—" "Good night, Julian." Arthur Vanderwall walked out of the Gilded Quill, leaving a stunned and furious Julian Thorne sitting alone at the table with a stack of unsigned, world-ending documents. Ethan didn't sleep. She sat on her lumpy sofa, the sounds of her ancient refrigerator wheezing in the tiny, cold apartment. She'd spent the night alternating between bursts of terror and waves of regret. She was fired. She was going to be evicted. Liam would have to drop out. And for what? For a man who probably hadn't even read her note. He'd probably crumpled it up and signed the papers anyway. She was a fool. She must have dozed off, because she was jolted awake by a sound that did not belong in her neighborhood. Silence. The usual 8 a.m. cacophony of sirens, shouting, and garbage trucks was muffled, as if the entire street was holding its breath. Ethan dragged herself to the window, pushing aside the threadbare curtain. Her heart stopped. Parked on her narrow, graffiti-scarred street, directly in front of her crumbling apartment building, was a car. No, it was a monolith. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, gleaming black, so new and polished it seemed to absorb the light around it. It was, without a doubt, the single most expensive object that had ever been on this block. Her neighbors were staring. Kids on their way to school had stopped, their mouths open. As she watched, a man in a black chauffeur's suit, complete with cap, exited the driver's side. He was tall, built like a former Marine, and moved with impossible efficiency. He didn't look at the crowd. He walked to her building's entrance, checked the name on the buzzer, and pressed. Ethan's intercom shrieked. She stared at it, her hand flying to her mouth. It shrieked again. Trembling, she pressed the talk button. "Hello?" A crisp, British-accented voice filled her apartment. "Ms. Ethan Vance?" Who is this?" "My name is Thomas. I am Mr. Arthur Vanderwall's personal driver. He requests your presence at your earliest convenience." "My presence?" "Yes, miss. He asked me to tell you, and I quote, 'Thank you for the coffee. It was clarifying.'" "The napkin." He read the napkin. I can't. I'm not dressed," she stammered, looking down at her black waitress uniform, which she'd slept in. "That is not a problem, miss. I am instructed to wait." Is this a threat? Did Mr. Thorne send you?" There was a slight pause. "Mr. Thorne is not, and will never again be, in a position to send me anywhere. Mr. Vanderwall is waiting. He is, I should add, extremely grateful. And he is concerned for your safety." That settled it. "I'll be right down." She splashed water on her face, brushed her teeth, and tied her tangled hair back. She had no other clothes to change into that were clean. She grabbed her thin coat and walked out of her apartment, down the stairs, and into the sunlight. The crowd on the street parted for her like the Red Sea. Thomas, the driver, was holding the rear door of the Rolls-Royce open. The interior was a cavern of cream-colored leather and polished wood. "Miss Vance?" She nodded, her throat dry, and slid in. The door closed with a silent, heavy thunk, sealing her off from her old life. The car pulled away from the curb as smoothly as a ship leaving port. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice a small whisper. "To the Vanderwall Tower, miss," Thomas replied, his eyes on the road. "Mr. Vanderwall has a job offer for you." The ride in the Phantom was like floating. The grime and noise of her world were replaced by silent, air-conditioned luxury. Ethan just sat, hands clenched in her lap, watching the city blur past. In 20 minutes, they had gone from the depths of the city's forgotten boroughs to the pinnacle of its wealth. The Vanderwall Tower was a spear of glass and steel piercing the sky. Thomas drove them not to the main entrance, but to a private subterranean garage. An elevator, opened with a private key, took them straight to the top. The doors opened not into a hallway, but directly into Arthur Vanderwall's penthouse apartment. It was less an apartment and more a small park, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, offering a god's-eye view of the entire city. Ethan had never seen so much space, so much light. Arthur Vanderwall was standing by the window, in a simple cashmere sweater and slacks. He looked as if he had aged 10 years since last night, but there was a new, hard light in his eyes. "Miss Vance, Ethan, please come in." "Mr. Vanderwall," she said, her voice small. The car, it's just a car," he said, waving it away. He walked over to her. He was a tall man, but he didn't loom. He looked at her with a profound, unsettling gratitude. "What you did last night, the courage it must have taken. You have no idea what you've done." I just didn't want him to be rude to you," she offered feebly. Arthur let out a short, harsh laugh. "Rude? Oh, my dear. He wasn't being rude. He was being thorough." He motioned to a long marble table. It was covered in documents, but not the ones from the restaurant. These were different. Bank statements, offshore holding reports, medical charts. I didn't sleep, Arthur said, his voice dropping. When I left the restaurant, I went to my office. I called my head of security, a man who reports only to me, and my personal forensic accounting team. I told them to audit Project Aegis, to audit Julian Thorne. He picked up a folder. You were right. The Aegis Fund was a Trojan horse, a legal construct designed to transfer 95% of Vanderwall Industries' liquid assets, property and holdings into a series of interlocking shell companies in the Cayman Islands, then to Switzerland, then to... Well, we lost the trail in Macau. As you heard, by the time the Tokyo market opened, I would have been hollowed out. He would have taken everything, Ethan whispered, horrified. Everything, Arthur confirmed. My company, my homes, my father's legacy. He's been planning this for years, siphoning small, untraceable amounts, building this weapon. Last night was the final stroke, the signature he needed to execute the entire plan. He paused and his face darkened. But that's not the worst of it. Stealing my money. That was just the beginning. He picked up one of the medical charts. I have a heart condition, Ethan. Arrhythmia. Manageable, with the right medication. I had trusted Julian with my personal affairs, entirely. He even recommended a new doctor for me 3 months ago. A specialist, he said. Arthur's hand was shaking. My security team vetted the new doctor. He's a fraud. His medical license was revoked in 3 states. He was paid by Julian to prescribe me a new medication. He held up a small orange bottle. These were supposed to be beta blockers, and they are. But my team had them analyzed last night. The dosage was wrong, incrementally. Each week the dosage was set to increase, just slightly. It wouldn't have shown up in a normal blood test. It was designed to slowly, very slowly, weaken my heart. Within 6 months, I would have had a natural, tragic, and fatal heart attack. Ethan gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. This wasn't just theft. This, Arthur said, his voice thick with a cold, terrifying rage, was attempted murder. He wasn't just hollowing out my company. He was planning to kill me, assume control as the bereaved friend, and be the sole, grieving beneficiary of a dead man's empire. He finally looked at her, his eyes piercing. You didn't just save my company, Ethan. You saved my life. Ethan sank deep into the plush white sofa, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. The silence of the penthouse was a physical weight, broken only by the distant, abstract hum of the city far below. The revelation of the medication, the calculated slow-motion poisoning. It had sent a new, colder spike of terror through her. This wasn't a crime of passion or greed. It was an execution. She was so lost in this horrifying realization that she barely registered Arthur pacing the vast expanse of the living room. He wasn't the gentle, academic man from the restaurant. He was a general whose fortress had been breached. He didn't just infiltrate my company, Ethan, Arthur said, his voice a low, furious rumble. He gestured to the city lights. He poisoned it. For years. While I was grieving my father, while I was building charities, he was seeding every department with his own people. My head of legal, his old law school roommate, my CFO, the man who covered for him in business school when Julian was caught embezzling from the student fund. I thought it was loyalty. I thought they were his people, but that they were also my people. But they were only ever his. He stopped and looked at her, his eyes hollow. I am surrounded by enemies I can't see. I am a king living in a court of spies. Every assistant, every board member, every driver. I have to assume they are all reporting back to him, even now. As if to punctuate his statement, a secure phone on his desk buzzed. A harsh, insistent sound. Arthur strode over and snatched it up, pressing a button. "Marcus, report." Ethan watched him listen. The muscles in his jaw tightened, and a new, cold rage entered his eyes. "What do you mean, bypassed?" he snapped. He listened for another 30 seconds, his back rigid. So he's in the wind. And his lawyers? He let out a short, harsh laugh. Of course they are. Incapacitated. Undue influence. And what about the FAA? Useless, as I thought. He hung up without saying goodbye. He turned back to Ethan. That was my head of security. Julian's private jet was grounded, so he bypassed it. We believe he's on a non-extradition-bound cargo ship, a container vessel by now. He's gone. Gone! Ethan felt a wave of dizzying relief. So, it's over? Over. Arthur looked at her, as if she'd grown a second head. My dear, it's just begun. He may be physically gone, but his attack is just now being launched. His lawyers, the ones from my own legal department, have just filed an emergency motion to have me declared medically incapacitated, citing extreme paranoia and erratic behavior. They are claiming I am under the undue influence of a new, opportunistic party. He pointed a finger at her. You, Ethan. They're painting a picture of a senile old fool being manipulated by a gold-digging waitress. He can't get the money, so now he'll try to destroy my reputation and have me legally removed from my own life. He's going to war. He walked, with heavy, deliberate steps, to stand directly in front of her. His spies are still here. His lawyers are still here. His infrastructure is still in place. And I am utterly blind. I have no one I can trust, except for the one person in my entire world who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, and chose to tell me the truth anyway. He held out his hand. I need your eyes, Ethan. I need your perception. I need the person who can see the predator in the room when everyone else is admiring his suit. Ethan just stared at his hand. What? What are you saying? I am offering you a job, he said, his voice flat and absolute. Not as a thank you. This is not a reward. This is a battlefield commission. I am offering you the position of my chief of staff. Ethan's jaw dropped. A hysterical little laugh bubbled in her throat. Chief of staff? Mr. Vanderwall. Arthur, I'm a waitress. I have half a community college degree in business admin. I pour coffee. I don't know finance. I don't know law. I don't know anything. I have a skyscraper full of men with Ivy League degrees and finance MBAs who just spent the last 3 years plotting to murder me. Arthur shot back, his voice like steel. I have enough experts. I am drowning in qualified people. What I don't have is character. I don't have integrity. I can teach you finance in a month. I can hire tutors who will teach you law, economics, and etiquette. He knelt, a motion that stunned her, bringing him to her eye level on the sofa. Ethan, look at me. I can't teach you to have courage. I can't teach you to see what you saw. You are the only person who is not on my payroll, not in my will, and not part of my world, who looked at me and saw a person in trouble. Everyone else in my life is a wolf. You're my canary. You're the one who can sense the poison in the air before I do. I don't need you to read a balance sheet. I need you to read people. She was shaking her head, overwhelmed. I can't. This is insane. I just want to go home. I just want to pay my rent. Arthur's face hardened. The kindness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard truth. You don't have a home to go back to, Ethan. What? You said you'd pay my rent." "I did," he said, standing up. "But you're not listening. Julian is at war, and in war, you neutralize all threats. Who warned me? Who was at the restaurant? Who was the variable?" He began to pace, painting a terrifying picture. "He's on that ship right now. And what is he thinking? Arthur knew. He was ready for me. How? And he'll go back. The meeting was perfect. The documents were flawless. I had him. Then, the interruption. The girl. The clumsy girl. The coffee." He spun to face her. "He'll trace it in an hour. He already knows he's the reason you were fired. He will see it as a loose end. You are not a person to him, Ethan. You are a loose thread. He doesn't just cut threads. He burns the whole tapestry to make sure." The blood drained from her face. "You're saying he would come after me?" "I am saying he would have you removed," Arthur said, his words sharp and brutal. "You are the witness who saw the murder before it happened. You are more dangerous to him than I am, because you are invisible. And you, more than anyone, know what an invisible person can overhear. You can't go back to your apartment. You can't go back to your life. He has burned it down. He left you with no job, and he has marked you as a target." She was trapped. It was a checkmate. She looked at him, her eyes wide with terror. "So," he said, his voice softening slightly, "this is not a choice. This is an alliance. You are much, much safer with me at the center of the storm than you are on the edges, where he can pick you off." He walked to his desk. He picked up a single, thick, leather-bound document. "This is your contract. You had this ready?" she whispered, horrified. "I had it drawn up 2 hours ago, while you were in the shower. I am a man who plans, Ethan, and I plan to win." He slid it onto the coffee table. "Your salary is listed on page 1. It's substantial. Page 2 details your benefits. This includes a permanent, fully staffed suite in this building. You can take the one you're in, or one of the penthouses on the 52nd floor. Your choice." He continued, his voice ticking off points like a machine. "I took the liberty of looking into your family. Your brother, Liam Vance. Sophomore at NYU, theoretical physics. A 4.0 GPA, despite working 30 hours a week at the library. He's brilliant." Ethan felt tears spring to her eyes. "How? Power, Ethan, is just information and the speed to act on it. As of an hour ago, an irrevocable trust was established in his name. It funds his entire education through to his PhD at any university in the world. It includes a stipend, housing, and his books. He will never have to work at that library again." He wasn't finished. "Your apartment, your landlord, a Mr. Henderson, was unpleasant. I bought the building. He has been retired. The building is being emptied for a full 9-month, top-to-bottom renovation. All the current tenants, including you, are being housed at my expense and will be given their new, upgraded apartments, rent-free for 1 year. As an apology for the inconvenience." Ethan's head was spinning. He hadn't just paid her rent. He had bought her street. "And finally," Arthur said, gesturing to the hallway. Thomas, the driver, had appeared, standing silently. Thomas is not a driver. He is former British SAS and was, until this morning, my personal head of security. He is now your head of security. He will never be more than 10 feet from you, ever. You are now the most well-protected woman in New York." He had thought of everything. He had built a gilded cage around her, but it was a cage designed to keep the wolves out, not to keep her in. He had solved every problem in her life, except the one he had just created. She looked at the contract. She looked at Arthur. She thought of Liam, safe. She thought of Julian, on a boat, plotting her death. Her old life was gone. It had vanished the moment she picked up that napkin. Ethan Vance, the waitress, took a deep breath and stood up. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a target. And now, she was a player. She met Arthur's gaze, and for the first time, he saw not fear, but a cold, hard resolve that matched his own. "Okay," she said, her voice small but not shaky. "Okay, what's our first move, sir?" "Sir." A slow, genuine smile spread across Arthur's face. It was the first one she had ever seen from him. "Our first move, Ethan, is that you stop calling me, sir. My name is Arthur. You work with me, not for me. And our second move is to stop him." "But he's gone," she said. "On a ship." "His body is on a ship," Arthur corrected. "His ghost is here, his lawyers, his planted stories in the press, his friends on my board. His war has begun, and it's a war of public opinion." He walked to the window, gesturing to the city. "And tomorrow night is the battle." "What's tomorrow night?" "The annual Vanderwall Foundation Gala, the single biggest charity event in New York," Arthur said, his voice dark. It was meant to be his coronation. The night where he would announce my tragic decline and his reluctant takeover. He's been briefing the press for weeks about my cognitive issues. "But he can't show up. He's a fugitive." "Exactly," Arthur said, turning to her, his eyes blazing with a new, brilliant, terrible idea. "He can't, which means his narrative, the one he's been building for a year, has a giant hole in it. The loyal friend isn't here to support his unstable boss. Julian will be a no-show. But I will be there, and you will be there." Ethan's heart sank. "The press. They'll eat me alive. They'll say exactly what his lawyers are saying." "Yes," Arthur said, a predatory glint in his eye. "They will. He will expect me to be a paranoid, raving lunatic. He will expect you to be a tarted-up, cheap gold digger. That's the story he has written for us. But we're not going to follow his script." He grinned. "We're going to use his own arrogance against him. He has built a beautiful stage. He's invited the whole world. He's set the trap. We are going to walk right into it, and we are going to spring it on him." I don't have anything to wear to a gala," Ethan said, the most practical, insane thought that popped into her head. Arthur laughed, a real booming laugh. "Oh, Ethan, don't you worry about that. We have 24 hours, and in that time, we are going to change your life, and tomorrow night, we are going to end his." The 24 hours that followed were a disorienting, high-pressure blur. Ethan felt less like a person and more like a project. She was taken from her tiny, crumbling apartment, which she was told was being fumigated and renovated as a cover story, and installed in a silent, opulent guest suite on the 50th floor of the Vanderwall Tower. She didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the city lights, trying to reconcile the woman she was with, the woman she was about to become. The next day, the team arrived. It was a small army of stylists, hairdressers, and poise coaches, all led by a severe woman named Genevieve. "Mr. Vanderwall's instructions are explicit," Genevieve said, circling Ethan as if she were a piece of unformed clay. "The brief is not pretty. It is not princess. The brief is understated power." Ethan was scrubbed, polished, and massaged. Her hands, calloused and chapped from years of hot plates and harsh detergents, were treated until they were soft. Her hair was cut, not short, but into a sleek, severe style that framed her face and highlighted the intelligence in her grey eyes. "You have good bones," Genevieve noted, as if this were a tactical advantage. Finally, the dress. It wasn't a glittering ball gown. It was a column of deep, midnight blue velvet, so dark it was almost black. It had long sleeves, a high neck, and a cut so precise it made her look taller, stronger. It was the color of a moonless night, a void. It was a dress meant to absorb light, not reflect it. "And this," Genevieve said, opening a heavy, velvet-lined box. "From the Vanderwall private vault." It wasn't a glittering tiara. It was a necklace, a single heavy, articulated piece of old-world diamonds and platinum, so heavy it felt like armor. Ethan touched it, her fingers trembling. It was cold. It's too much," Ethan whispered, looking at her reflection. She saw a stranger, a formidable, cold woman she didn't recognize. "Nonsense," Genevieve said, clasping it around her neck. "It is exactly the right amount. Now remember, do not fidget, do not apologize, do not, under any circumstances, giggle. You are not there to make friends. You are there to bear witness." When she met Arthur by the private elevator, he was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He stopped, his breath catching. He didn't just see a woman in a nice dress. He saw the physical manifestation of the steel spine he had only glimpsed in the restaurant. She was no longer Ethan, the waitress. She was Ethan Vance, a woman who looked like she could command armies. "Ethan," he said, his voice quiet with awe, "you look formidable." "So do you, Arthur," she replied, and was surprised to find her voice was perfectly steady. The dress, the diamonds, they were a uniform, and she was going to war. "Thomas is waiting," he said, offering his arm. The ride in the Rolls-Royce Phantom was silent, but charged. The air crackled with anticipation. "Are you ready?" Arthur asked, as they pulled up to the glittering facade of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. "No," Ethan said honestly, "but I'm going to do it anyway." "That," Arthur said with a small smile, "is the very definition of courage." The press was a shrieking, flashing wall of bodies. As Thomas opened the door, the noise was deafening. "Arthur! Arthur! Is it true you're stepping down?" "Who is she, Arthur? Is that the new girlfriend?" "Arthur, is your health failing?" "Ethan Vance, is that her? Is it true he picked you up from a diner? Is it true you're just a waitress?" The last question was shouted with particular cruelty. Ethan flinched, but Arthur's hand was a firm, warm presence on her lower back. "Keep walking," he murmured in her ear. "Don't look at them. They are not the audience. They are just the noise." They ascended the grand staircase, the flashes bouncing off the marble. Ethan kept her chin up, her eyes fixed forward, just as Genevieve had taught her. She felt the weight of the diamonds on her neck, a cold, steadying anchor. They entered the great hall, which was set for dinner. But the main event, the reception and speeches, was in the Temple of Denda. The room was breathtaking. The ancient Egyptian temple was illuminated against the massive glass wall, looking out onto a dark central park. The air was filled with the sound of a string quartet and the high, brittle laughter of the city's elite. And there, by the reflecting pool, holding court as if he owned the temple itself, was Julian Thorne. He was immaculate in a custom tuxedo, a dark red carnation in his lapel. He was surrounded by admirers, laughing, his teeth a white slash in his handsome face. He saw them. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes went dead. He knew. He knew Arthur wouldn't be here unless something was wrong. But he had no idea how much was wrong. He let them come to him, a king receiving supplicants. As Arthur and Ethan approached, the circle around Julian parted. "Arthur!" Julian boomed, his voice a performance of concerned friendship. He embraced Arthur, a one-armed proprietary hug. "My friend, I'm so glad you could make it. I heard you had a minor episode after our dinner. We've all been so worried." He was already planting the seeds. Arthur is unstable. Arthur is unwell. Then he turned his poisonous charm on Ethan. His eyes raked over her, from her sleek hair to the hem of her velvet dress. It was a look of appreciative contempt. "And you? My goodness, the little waitress from the Gilded Quill. You clean up surprisingly well." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Tell me, how much is he paying you for this performance? Or did you just find a new service to offer now that you're unemployed?" The nearby listeners tittered. Ethan felt a hot flash of her old fear, her old invisibility. She wanted to shrink. But then she felt the cold weight of the diamonds. She remembered the audio recording of Julian planning Arthur's death. She met his gaze, her own as cold as the reflecting pool beside them. "I'm still just a waitress, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "My job is to observe, to serve, to clean up messes." She paused, looking him directly in the eyes. "And I've learned that the most dangerous vermin are simply the ones who wear the most expensive suits." Julian's smile faltered. A flash of pure, unadulterated fury crossed his face before he smoothed it over. The laughter around them died. "You're a long way from your dirty apartment, little girl," he hissed, for her ears only. "You'll be back there soon enough, once Arthur is resting permanently. Enjoy the champagne while you can." "Julian," Arthur said, his voice like granite, "your concern is, as always, touching. If you'll excuse us, I believe I have a speech to make." Arthur walked away, leaving Ethan to follow. Julian watched them go, his mask back in place, but his eyes were narrowed. He had been challenged by the help, and he would not forget it. The lights in the vast hall dimmed. A spotlight hit the small stage set up near the temple's entrance. Arthur mounted the steps, Ethan watching from the side, her heart hammering so hard she was sure it was visible through the velvet. She scanned the crowd. She saw the faces Arthur had pointed out in the car, the board members on Julian's payroll, the journalists he'd been feeding stories to. They all looked smug, expectant, waiting for the unstable Arthur Vanderwall to implode. "Thank you all for coming," Arthur began, his voice echoing, strong and clear. There was no tremor. "This foundation, my father's foundation, has always been about legacy. It's about what we build, what we protect, and what we leave behind." He looked across the sea of faces, his gaze finally landing on Julian, who stood near the front, a perfect picture of loyal support. "For 20 years, Arthur continued, I have believed that my legacy was intertwined with one man, a man I called my friend, a man I called my brother, my COO, Julian Thorne." A polite, warm applause rippled through the room. Julian bowed his head, a mask of perfect, humble friendship. He was loving this. He thought this was the moment Arthur announced his retirement and handed him the keys. "Julian has been so concerned with my affairs," Arthur said, his voice hardening. "My business, my portfolio, my health. He even helped me manage my medication." A confused murmur went through the crowd. This was not the usual boilerplate gala speech. This was personal. "And tonight," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a cold, clear command, "I wanted to give him a gift, a small token of my appreciation, a tribute, if you will, to his tireless, behind-the-scenes work. Please roll the tribute." On the massive screen above the stage, which had been displaying the foundation's logo, a video flickered to life. It was black and white, grainy. Ethan recognized it instantly. It was the security feed from the alcove by the kitchen at the Gilded Quill. Julian's voice, amplified, filled the sacred hall, cold, hissing, and utterly devoid of charm. The Aegis Fund is just a clearinghouse. The moment he signs, the primary transfer to the Cayman holding is triggered. From there, it's gone, untraceable. A pause, and then the killing blow. By the time the markets open in Tokyo, Vanderwall will be a memory. I want him hollowed out. The hall went utterly, completely silent. You could hear the ice shifting in 1,000 cocktail glasses. Every single eye in the room swiveled from the screen to Julian Thorne. Julian's face was ashen. He was staring at the screen, his mouth half open. This is absurd, he stammered, looking around. A fabrication. Arthur, are you insane? This is out of context. Am I, Julian? Arthur's voice was a cold whip. Out of context? Then, let's add some context, shall we? The footage on the screen vanished, replaced by a simple audio file waveform. This, Arthur said to the crowd, is a phone call Mr. Thorne made 2 days ago to a specialist he had hired for me. A doctor whose license was revoked in 3 states. Julian's voice again, but this time he was terrified. Julian, he's getting suspicious. He didn't sign. Second voice, raspy. It doesn't matter if he signs. He's a dead man. The new prescription is in his system. The dosage is perfect. His heart will just stop. It's untraceable. Julian, when? Second voice. A month? Maybe 2. It will look like a tragic, natural end. And you'll be there to pick up the pieces, won't you? A woman in the front row gasped and dropped her champagne flute. The sound of it shattering on the marble floor was the only sound in the room. It was no longer a misunderstanding. It was no longer out of context. This was attempted murder. Julian Thorne turned to run. He shoved a waiter aside. The irony was lost on him, and made a break for the side exit leading to the service hallways. But his path was blocked. Standing there, as solid and immovable as the temple itself, was Thomas, Arthur's chauffeur. He simply stood, arms crossed, filling the doorway. Julian skidded to a stop. He looked left. He looked right. The crowd shrank away from him, as if he were carrying a plague. And then, walking calmly through the parted sea of millionaires, came 2 men in dark blue, professional suits. NYPD. Julian Thorne, one of them said, his voice loud and official in the suffocating silence. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud, and attempted murder. As the officers reached for him, Julian's mask of civilization finally, completely, cracked. He became feral. Get your hands off me, he shrieked. Do you know who I am? They cuffed him. The sound of the metal ratchet clicking shut seemed to echo off the ancient stones. And that's when he saw Ethan. She was standing just off the stage, watching him, her face not triumphant, but calm. He lunged at her, a motion of pure, unadulterated hatred, pulling the officers with him. You! He screamed, his voice raw, spittle flying from his lips. You did this! You! Waitress! He spat at her. The glob landed on the velvet of her dress. Ethan didn't flinch. She didn't wipe it off. The entire hall was frozen, watching this final, horrifying exchange. The press, recovering from their shock, began snapping photos, the flashes illuminating Julian's contorted, rabid face. Ethan took one calm, deliberate step towards him. She looked at the man who had tried to destroy so many lives, at the man who had called her an idiot, at the man who had dismissed her as nothing. You're right, Julian, she said. her voice quiet, but it carried in the dead silence. I am the help. I'm the one who serves. I'm the one who observes, and I'm the one who cleans up the messes. She paused, leaning in just slightly, her diamond necklace glittering in the flashes. You're the biggest mess I've ever seen. You asked me a question back at the restaurant. You held up your coffee-stained sleeve and you yelled, "Do you know what this costs?" She gestured to the police, to his cuffed hands, to the room full of his ruined reputation, to the entire collapsed architecture of his life. Now you do, she said. I'm the waitress, and I'm the one who's finally bringing you the check. Julian Thorne let out an inhuman roar of rage as the officers dragged him away. The hall erupted into a chaotic symphony of shouting, whispering, and crying. The gala was over. Arthur Vanderwall walked off the stage, his face exhausted but free. He ignored the hands grabbing at his sleeve, the questions being shouted at him. He walked straight to Ethan, standing alone in the center of the storm. He took a handkerchief from his pocket, gently bent down, and wiped the spittle from her dress. "You were magnificent," he whispered. The press surged forward, a wall of cameras and microphones. "Arthur, what happens to Vanderwall Industries now? Who is this woman, really?" Arthur raised his free hand for silence. He looked at Ethan, then at the frantic crowd. "My apologies, ladies and gentlemen, for the interruption," he said, his voice booming once more. "The gala is over, but Vanderwall Industries is not." He put his arm around Ethan's shoulders, pulling her firmly to his side. "This is Miss Ethan Vance. She is not my girlfriend. She is not a performance. She is my partner. She is my new chief of staff, and she is the woman who saved my life and this company. If you have any further questions, you can direct them to her office on Monday." He turned, with his arm still linked with hers, and together they walked. They did not run. They walked, with their heads held high, straight through the stunned crowd, past the shattered champagne glass, and out the grand entrance of the museum, leaving a new legend and 1,000 questions in their wake. As the doors of the Phantom closed, sealing them once again in silence, Ethan let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for 2 days. She looked at Arthur, the kind, lonely man from the restaurant. "It's not over," she said, her voice a whisper. "Men like that, they don't just stop." Arthur looked at her, the waitress who had become his rescuer. "No," he agreed, as the car pulled away, leaving the chaos behind. "It's just the beginning. Thank you for watching this story. The world is full of invisible people with the power to change everything. Ethan went from pouring coffee to running an empire, all because she chose to do the right thing when no one was watching. But the real story is just beginning. Julian Thorne is powerful, and men like him don't just disappear. What do you think will happen next? Will Julian get his revenge from behind bars? And what will Ethan do with her newfound power? Let us know your ideas in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of drama, revenge, and unexpected justice, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good twist. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We read all your comments and can't wait to see you in the next video.